Morality is the branch of philosophy that seeks to define the rules of good conduct. This means a life lived according to what is considered good. But you might ask, what is good? And more importantly, how can we know that our conception of good is the right one? To answer this question, we must explain the main philosophical ideas regarding morality, and you will see that the answers tend to be quite divergent. For some, morality is a subjective and relative matter. This implies that the criteria distinguishing what is legitimate from what is not are primarily the result of our culture, environment, or era. Essentially, the good is our own conception of good. Let's examine this with an example. What makes murder morally wrong? You can say because it causes suffering to the one who's killed. However, it's possible to kill without causing any suffering. You can say that the prohibition of murder is what allows us to live safely in a society. In this case, morality is nothing more than a law aiming to regulate society. Is it because life should be respected? It's a possible answer. But then the problem simply shifts, because we still need to ask on what grounds should life be respected, or even why should life be respected. When we raise the moral question, the question of what is right and what is wrong inevitably brings forth another question. On what basis does something become morally wrong? Or simply put, who decides? Is there any authority on this matter? Is it divine? Is it human? Throughout history, moral principles found their foundation in religion, particularly the belief in God. The concept was straightforward. God was the ultimate source of what is considered good, and his will was communicated through the religious scriptures. Adhering to goodness meant following God's commands, and if a certain action like murder was deemed wrong, it was solely because God had explicitly forbidden it. This connection between morality and religion has shaped ethical perspective for centuries, providing a clear-cut framework for people to navigate life based on divine guidance. The intertwining of moral values and religious beliefs influenced individual behavior and played a significant role in shaping societal norms. In the aftermath of the Enlightenment era, the influence of religion began to decline, a period marked by Nietzsche's famous statement, "God is dead." This long period was marked by scientific, intellectual, and philosophical advancements and discoveries which significantly influenced society. One major impact of the Enlightenment era was the displacement of Christianity as the dominant and guiding authority on truth. The newfound knowledge made the religious narrative obsolete and pushed people to adopt new ways of living. What's interesting here is that after this decline and the replacement of the religious moral system, morality didn't disappear. This meant that good could exist independently of the faith of God or God's guidance. This new conception opened the door to the idea that moral values aren't and never were transcendent values, but in fact were simply a social construct, a construct aiming to regulate and simplify people's lives. Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher and one of the central Enlightenment thinkers, believed that morality is founded not on faith, but on reason. To create a universal system for morality, Kant came up with the categorical imperative, which is a way of evaluating motivations for action. This imperative dictates the obligation to follow what is good, regardless of the circumstances. The obligation is articulated as follows: act in such a way that you can will the maxim of your action to be a universal law. For Kant, true morality resided in actions driven by goodwill. However, this perspective faced criticism, particularly for putting too much emphasis on the form and not on the content. Critics argued that it lacked practical guidance in determining the nature of good. The utilitarians have strongly opposed Kant's morality and pointed out that his conception of good is not only abstract but also false. The central question persisted: what exactly does it mean to have goodwill? Jeremy Bentham, an English philosopher and the founder of utilitarianism, argued that we call good whatever is conducive to increasing our happiness. Bentham's philosophy was founded on the following principle: the greatest happiness of the greatest number is the measure of good and wrong. Simply put, humans would create a moral system in a way that maximizes their happiness. Here, happiness became the guiding principle in life. However, in 1945, Karl Popper, an English philosopher, agreed with this fundamental principle but introduced a subtle shift. Popper argued that the maxim should be revised from maximize pleasure to minimize pain. In other words, he advocated for a utilitarian approach focused on reducing suffering rather than solely emphasizing the pursuit of pleasure. For him, pain avoidance was the driving force of all actions, good and bad. Let's explore the murder example we discussed earlier by considering the perspectives of both Bentham and Popper. Morality forbids murder not merely because life is inherently valuable, but rather because it is in our best interest to prohibit it. Simply put, murder causes distress for everyone involved, and since humans are naturally drawn to pleasure and repelled by pain, it is clear that banning murder is necessary as it goes against these fundamental principles. Therefore, in matters of morality, there exists a commitment to pursue actions that promote happiness and a prohibition against activities that cause pain on a collective level. What better way to prevent discomfort than to outright forbid it? And what could be more impactful than marking it as inherently wrong? As we saw in the last video, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche agreed with this view. For him, we call good whatever aligns with our interests. Why would generosity be on the side of good while selfishness is on the side of evil? Because it's in our interest. It's in my interest that others are there to help me when I need them. In other words, our vital interest guides our moral laws. According to Nietzsche, the origin of everything can be traced back to the human body, to the tangible and material connection with existence. The laws we create are stemming from our body's necessities. Embracing a naturalistic perspective, he believed that humans, like animals, are driven by the instinct for survival. The moral system we create has one main objective: to support this instinct, which he referred to as the will to power. The ego isn't morally wrong if it eats a rabbit. This is simply the natural instinct of the ego, and it won't change. The ego will never feel guilty or apologize for acting on its survival instincts. On the other hand, the rabbit will try its best to portray the ego as evil and immoral because it's not in the rabbit's best interest to be eaten. This is why Nietzsche believed that morality is nothing more than a socially accepted form of self-interest and thus could never be considered a sacred or intrinsic entity. It's just an instrument for survival. This perspective is shared by the German philosopher Max Stirner, who is known for his philosophy of egoism. Stirner's philosophy posits that when an idea is adopted as an absolute truth or becomes a maxim, it restricts people and confines them in their way of living and thinking. He believed that such convictions were akin to mental prisons and should be avoided at all costs. Humans shouldn't be told what to do or how to behave, and everyone should simply follow their best interest. This moral perspective, which claims that morality is primarily a matter of interest, is what is referred to as nihilism. In simpler terms, it proposes that moral values lack an objective reality outside of our thoughts. Nihilism suggests that moral values are mental constructs existing solely within our minds and have no external existence, and thus have no value or importance. This will be the topic of the next video to explore the concept of nihilism from Nietzsche's perspective. Defined this way, morality is a layer imposed upon reality. It means that morality isn't inherently present in the natural world, meaning that it doesn't pertain to facts. Crimes, lies, and thefts are factual events. However, asserting that a crime merits punishment, condemning lying, or determining the illegitimacy of theft involves introducing an element beyond factual reality. It requires making a judgment about reality. Morality lacks objectivity because it involves judgments, and the source of judgment is the mind, which makes it subjective. The viewpoint on morality presented here wasn't embraced by the ancient philosophers, especially not by Plato. According to Plato, the concept of good isn't a mental construct or a mere product of reason. Rather, it's an essence. In other words, it is an independent and inherent reality. It's crucial to understand that in Plato's philosophical framework, the concept of essence holds greater importance than reality itself, the reality we experience through our senses like the material world. Plato suggests that essences are responsible for creating our tangible reality, and the ultimate essence is represented by the good, which is above all others. For Plato, what we call evil is nothing more than the degradation of the original good. Degradation here means the corruption of goodness. Evil is viewed as good that has derived from its intended path. This echoes Socrates' famous statement, "No one does evil willingly." This means that every person thinks that they're doing good, and hence evil is just a misjudgment of the true good. Essentially, evil is just an accident related to the fact that the material world is a realm of imperfection subject to degradation. In that case, even goodness is not exempt from this principle of degradation. An analogy can be made here. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the French philosopher, believed that children are born pure and innocent. However, as they start interacting with the world, they become aware of corruption and learn about about evil. This means that they learn to deviate from what is considered good. According to Plato and Rousseau, evil exists only when we depart from our original tendency towards the good. This echoes the main argument of existentialism and leads us to Jean-Paul Sartre's famous quote, "Man is condemned to be free." We're condemned because freedom opens the door to endless possibilities, including good and evil. In this scenario, it is our responsibility to choose our path and direct our actions. This puts a heavy weight on our shoulders as we must bear the consequences of our actions, whether good or bad. As humans, we're always curious and tempted to try new things, even if they're considered wrong. And this is primarily how we learn about good and evil, through trial and error. This is a perfect explanation of the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Eve broke the rule and ate the forbidden fruit even though she was instructed by God not to. Since she had the freedom of choice, she also had the possibility of deviating from good, which gave her the possibility of trying something new. She was tempted by a snake, which is a metaphorical representation of the devil, who tempts people to stray from the righteous path. This is what led the Russian revolutionary and anarchist Mikhail Bakunin to claim that Satan is the inventor of freedom, because freedom is the possibility of deviating from the path of good. Without freedom, one stays good forever. Without freedom, one stays innocent. This is why being ignorant of evil doesn't make one good. Being good means acknowledging the existence of evil, but deciding to do good instead. Being good is acting righteous despite the temptation of evil. A person who refrains from stealing despite having the ability to do so is good. On the other hand, an innocent person who isn't even aware of the possibility of stealing isn't necessarily good. They're just innocent. Now that we've explored the different conceptions of morality, we still don't have a clear-cut answer about its nature. But this leaves us with an interesting question. What about the subjective experience of a good or a bad conscience? Does that tell us anything about morality? To answer this question, we need to examine Fyodor Dostoevsky's novel Crime and Punishment, since its protagonist Raskolnikov faced a similar predicament with his conscience. He believed that human beings had no intrinsic value, and as a result, he was free to do whatever he wanted. In an attempt to rise above the concept of moral duality and reject the ideas of good and evil, he takes the life of an old terrible woman for whom he has reasons to kill. However, he soon realizes that morality does exist, not in a set of written rules, but rather within his own conscience. The weight of guilt he feels in the aftermath of the murder is overwhelming, causing him to break down and undergo a profound transformation that will change him forever. Raskolnikov before and after the murder could be seen as two completely different people. This shows the consequences of not taking the divine aspect of human life seriously. He realizes that even though one can escape morality in thought, doing so in action is an entirely different matter. The main idea here is that our actions determine our morality rather than what's written in text or dictated by society. When it comes to determining right from wrong, we all possess a strong sense of intuition. Our intuition gives us a hint on whether what we're doing is good or bad, and then our conscience confirms it. Therefore, it's crucial to trust your intuition and let your conscience be your moral compass. In life, you will inevitably misjudge and make mistakes, and that's totally fine. The most important thing is embracing these experiences as opportunities for growth and refinement. Being good is a long journey of learning from your mistakes, since no one is born perfect. Put yourself to the test, reflect on your actions, fix your mistakes, and repeat. This is the best way to become a better person and honor your moral obligation to create a positive impact in the world. As Aristotle said, the moral virtues then are produced in us neither by nature nor against nature. Nature indeed prepares in us the ground for their reception, but their complete formation is the product of habit. Thank you for watching.